One. This is David Schumann here for the Successful Life podcast. I'm on today with Derek Gallimore, outsourcing guru, live here from the Philippines. So we have him here internationally, which definitely is, I think we've had some people from England and Canada, but this is definitely farther reaching for us, coming all the way from the Philippines. Welcome, Derek.
Hi, thanks so much, David.
I wanted to really just jump right into it. And first of all, I found this topic to be one of the most challenging and interesting topics myself. I myself outsource a ton of stuff and probably do it terribly. I would add to that. I have tried many different methods over the years. So without further ado, I want you to kind of let everybody know your background. You can talk a little bit about your background in business, but obviously specifically drive to what you're doing now in outsourcing.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks so much for having me. Outsourcing, I'm super passionate about. Just a little bit of background. I have been entrepreneurial and been in business for about the last 20 years. I had a property company based in central London, and then I got into corporate housing based in central London. And as a result of that, we built an outsourcing back end in the Philippines, and then effectively grew that up to about 80 people where we were operating the entire business. So I have first-hand experience in outsourcing, and then moved to Manila in the Philippines in about 2014 to spend more time on the outsourcing aspect. And then from that, I've built Outsource Accelerator because I saw the need for people for an easier way to connect businesses in the West with outsourcing suppliers in the Philippines.
So I've done it so many different ways in the past, and it's incredibly interesting to me, the outsourcing business and what's all about that and how to build that part of the business. I've struggled myself with many different ways, and I think a lot of people struggle with the cost and the different methods to go and outsource, who to trust. Obviously you're there in the Philippines, so you get to work directly with your group, which is probably a huge advantage, I would assume. What are some of the things that people should really look for in outsourcing? And when you get 9 million emails on it a day, how do you sift through that? I mean, I guess I don't know how people figure out that you have your own business and all that kind of stuff. But when you sift through that, how do you sift through outsourcing to find someone like yourself and find the right price, find the right product? Is it trial and error? Is there what's a good method?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, outsourcing, it's a really broad term. So you've got the kind of Tim Ferriss side hustle kind of freelancer type outsourcing. There's the Upwork and freelancer that kind of cater to those one-off jobs, the logos, things like that. And then the other end of the spectrum, you have highly professionalized outsourcing suppliers that might be, they might have American Express and Toyota and Microsoft as their clients. So you have the full spectrum of this thing. Where I suggest for people, if you've got a small and medium-sized business, even if you're an entrepreneur or a startup, is start in the mid-range of that spectrum where you have professionalized outsourcing services, but the suppliers, the companies are used to working with small and medium-sized businesses and entrepreneurs in the West. And there, you're not dealing with home-based people. The risk with home-based people is that you're just exposed to, far more variance. There's no quality control, and there's sort of more external uncertainties. Whereas if you go with a professionalized supplier, then everything is a lot more reliable. They cost a little bit more, but you're still saving about 70% on the salaries that you would pay in the West.
Right. And then I guess the question on that is, everybody like to have, like, for example, virtual assistant, right? I've burned through a few of those. I've had some real good ones, but obviously they want to have consistent work and there are certain tasks they can do. And my frustration, and maybe a lot of other people's frustration, is they can do this part really well, but once you progress beyond that, then they struggle. So you need a different virtual assistant to do something else. And, so how do you work people through that? How do you work how do you find for customers the best fit? Like, for one-off projects, Fiverr's been great. Like, if I want to do something inexpensive and nail it, Fiverr's pretty good. You make a mistake, they kick you back the dough, which is great. Like, a guy doesn't do their job, they just kick you back the dough. No, basically, usually it's pretty easy to filter out. But if you go and invest in a virtual assistant, it's not like investing in an employee or in any other task, I guess. But it's not exactly like investing in an employee, but there is an investment without having to get some level of traditional interview and experience. We rely a lot on someone like yourself to be able to guide us, right? So how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. We can help guide you through the market. On our website, we list 700 outsourcing suppliers, and we can help you navigate the market and also help you set up the team and the structure and the processes that are appropriate for your needs and your business. In terms of, you hit the nail on the head when you said it's similar to employment and employing someone. There's a whole spectrum of outsourcing. So if you need a $5 logo done and you don't need anything else beyond that, that is really a project, and that's like in the US, getting someone to do a project for you. That is very different to an ongoing role that then effectively you treat them as an employee. And I want to sort of demystify what outsourcing is. And I think the simplest way is to just consider outsourcing the same as employment, except that they are based somewhere else other than your hometown. So if you think of it no different to employment, then if you look for part-time people, then generally they're not going to be as reliable. If you look for one-off jobs, then generally they're going to be juggling a lot of different jobs. Whereas if you find someone, invest in them up front in terms of bringing them on board, the culture, the education, creating the processes, then those people will really, really pay off over the longer term. So it is a slight bigger commitment, but then the returns are exponential compared to a lot of people that kind of engage in this early stage of outsourcing, and then they find they take kind of 2 steps forwards, then 3 months later 2 steps back, they start again, and there's kind of a general frustration.
That's a really good point. So you invested in them like they, as if they're your regular employees. That's a big part of it, treating them in as much as possible like that way. How can we tell me a little bit about how you ended up getting into this? How did you end up getting into this business? I'm assuming, and I could be wrong, you weren't always in the Philippines. And how you kind of jumped over there. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been running businesses since I was about 20, which is about 20 years. And in about 2011, I had a pretty big and fast-growing business in London, and I realized that I needed 24/7 customer service for that, and I just wasn't going to get that affordably in London. So outsourcing presented itself, and I very quickly saw how incredibly effective outsourcing was for my business and also a lot of other businesses. I then moved over here to Manila in the Philippines in 2014, and for people that haven't been here, it is an outsourcing mecca for the world. It is the world's capital of outsourcing, and I realized that there's about 1.2 million professionals in outsourcing here. There's about and so there's this huge, highly sophisticated industry in outsourcing. And I realized that there was no aggregator platform. There was no way of you guys in the West, whether you're in the UK, US, wherever, with small businesses, have no way of navigating this market. So, I created that aggregator platform, which is Outsource Accelerator, to basically help people do that.
And onboarding. So how did you, come up with an onboarding platform? Now you're working with, many different outsourcers now, but how do you onboard people? Like what is what is one of the ways or a couple ways that you onboard people so they increase their likelihood of success?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it really depends on the person. As you know, business varies. If you've got one employee or 1,000 employees, then it's very, very different. If you are, an electrician versus flying rockets into space, that is very different as well. So initially, we do a needs analysis of the business. We typically look at the org chart of the business, where their weaknesses and strengths are, what their core capabilities are, and what their weaknesses are, but also what they generally want to get rid of them versus what they want to keep close to them. So we do this analysis of their business. And look, to be honest, initially what we try and do is get the low-hanging fruit, the quick wins for outsourcing so that people get confidence, and then the sky is the limit. Once people get one or two people really working well, then you can just add rocket fuel to the flame, basically, and we just see businesses absolutely flourish.
Now, are people operating their whole bit? Like, I use myself for this example. Let's see. I had a company that my company was skyrocketing, and then it became, we had 15 employees in house, and then it became ineffective cost wise because we run events all over the country, and it became ineffective to do it. And so I started having people in local regions operating their own business within a business, right? Which is outsourcing it. But my in-house work that I used to get done doesn't get done in the same way that it used to get done without the people that were in-house as we started decentralizing. So obviously that would be, that would signal, right, good candidate there. How do you go and, what are like the kind of steps to starting, like once they get beyond the virtual assistant handling the basic day-to-day, how do you start to take the next step and maybe like web and all these different areas that you could start to outsource? How do you kind of, what's the process behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, as I mentioned at the start, it very similar to employment. If you have one random person sitting in a random office, then you are very much the hub and spoke. Everything comes back to you. Whereas if you get to a position where you are employing more than one person, or introduce processes into it, then people aren't always coming back to you. And, I would assume with about 15 people, you would have been spending, about $100,000 a month in salaries and office costs and the sort of extra costs. Now, you can save about $70,000 per month on that structure. Now, you can effectively, just like employment, have that exact structure in the Philippines where you have operations managers, you have supervisors, you have quality assurance people, and actually, you can enable yourself and your business to build better structures because you have more abundant, more affordable, highly qualified staffing at your fingertips. And so you can build anything you want in the Philippines. It's just about how you approach it and how you're going to structure this. And a lot of people, they keep themselves as the hub, and then everyone is feeding off them. And that can be exhausting, especially if there's quality assurance problems, or you've got to replace people, you've got to retrain people. So it's essential as sort of quickly as possible to build a bit more of a hierarchy or a structure when you're outsourcing, so that there becomes a momentum and they become self-sustainable. And while that sounds crazy that I'm just saying hire 15 people, when you are saving 70 to 80%, then it enables you to actually develop more of a structure and mature your organization earlier than you would if you're hiring people in the US. So it's quite an enabler.
Interesting. So how about stuff like, for example, sales, right? And like, so when you get into like the really high value jobs, can outsourcing help in stuff like that, really high value jobs that actually could bring in revenue to your business, not just the ordinary operations?
Yeah, absolutely. Sales, there are some things, and I spoke earlier about the low hanging fruit. Sales, it depends on your industry, and it depends on the level of esoteric knowledge of your industry. You know, if you're selling something very specific to your hometown, then the Filipinos probably won't have that cultural alignment to be able to really nail it. Whereas if they're selling accounting products, which is very standard, they would be able to nail that more. The Philippines also is more passive in nature, so they're not kind of hardcore salespeople. But there is nothing that the Filipino workforce cannot do. You just have to work with the different structures in place. You know, we have clients that are fully qualified naval sea captains. They are sitting behind a desk in Manila, and they are literally steering oil tankers in the middle of the sea. You know, we have people that are analyzing data from Danish satellite dishes, and they are tweaking the satellite dishes by half a degree to get better mobile optimization. Equally, we have people doing web marketing, WordPress maintenance, blogs, content, video editing. So there's the whole gamut of things that you can get done and get outsourced. Basically anything that can be done now in front of a computer screen, which is pretty much everything.
Right. That's very true. Everything now. I know offices are big companies which get tax breaks in America for having people in offices and have to have 50% occupation rates. Can't get 50% occupation rates if people are working from home. So
for sure.
That shows you a lot right there. The upfront portion of it. How important is the upfront work on it? Because I found that actually in the times I've had success, I guess the more upfront I do with them, the better off you are. Talk a little bit about, the training aspect of the people that you work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's essential, really. Look, if you were sitting shoulder to shoulder with someone in your hometown, it's a little bit easier because you can learn by osmosis and people can watch you. There is more friction when you're outsourcing because there is obviously that barrier between you and the worker and between you. So yes, you do actually have to spend more time in terms of upfront onboarding, training, onboarding them in terms of the culture, your mission, your values, and it's called process mapping. You know, it's good to basically clearly outline your processes, map them out so that there's a better understanding of how you work. And a lot of the organizations in the US, they actually don't realize, quite the processes, and they haven't invested in the kind of mapping that is necessary to get a business to scale. And so it pushes, when people outsource, it actually pushes them through this maturation curve of getting their business down on paper, out of the founder's or entrepreneur's head onto paper, so that this is then scalable. Look, you don't need to write everything down. These are not computers, they are people. But it's about getting the core, the kernel of your business, your mission, your values, over to the Philippines. You don't have to do this with every person you hire. You need to instill that in core people in the team. Then they can hire more people, and then it grows as organizations do, and then it removes you from being that central hub and spoke model as well. So yeah, you need to transfer it over, but then it can grow organically by itself.
Very interesting. And for people, like in the States, for example, where they have concern about the fact that, and I understand it, but help people understand it, the cost of living and everything like out there, so, I mean, I've used it and I understand the fact that the dynamics of obviously that this in a lot of cases, a lot more money than they would be making, outside in Manila, or wherever they are, whatever country they're from. Explain a little bit about that so people understand, what the cost of living is and how well those people are actually doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is critical. Outsourcing, I really want to, make a point of this, is a win-win for everyone. There is concern that, people are losing jobs in the US. Outsourcing is really an enabler to build a bigger, more successful business, which keeps more employment in the US, but also benefits people in the Philippines as well. The Philippines, is a developing economy, but you can see out, in the back, there's a lot of sky rises, there's, shiny buildings and stuff. The average salary here is generally very low. The average nurse, for example, working in a state hospital would be earning about $200 per month. Now, the outsourcing industry enables these kids, these people, to do white-collar work with a career ladder in A-grade offices, and they will be earning, like a 23, 24-year-old graduate would be earning about $500 to $600 per month. So it's about 3x what the nurse, for example, would be earning. And there's a great career ladder. They get to work with people in the West, and they get to do exciting projects. So it's absolutely a win-win. And the industry alone, is now supporting 1.2 million people, which is supporting about 5 million people, including all the families, and it is literally pulling this country from an emerging market into a developed economy. So it's absolutely incredible for everyone in the Philippines. But as well, I have to stress that it's an incredible opportunity for people in the US and business and communities generally.
Yeah, I think it's what, people used to go. I used to work in tech before I got into running my own company, and we used to outsource over in India. And then over in India, many of the great tech people that we were outsourcing to became more expensive. And as their lifestyle continued to grow and they continued to, the economies continued to boom for them, they moved to another country. And obviously the Philippines, and I think Pakistan was another country that a lot of outsourcing was going to. And it gives those countries and people, in my opinion, an opportunity to take, obviously, white-collar jobs is a big deal, because now you don't have to go out and do manual labor. That can change their families forever, literally. And you get them start to think about jobs and education in a different way, which ultimately helps to boom not just their local economy, but ultimately the developing nation. So I totally see how that can happen. I think it's incredibly helpful for people to understand that nurse analogy is fantastic, because when you talk about in the States, a nurse will make, starting out 65, 75,000 a year, very quickly is making six figures in the United States. And to say that somebody in the Philippines, that a person's equivalent, it could be making 2 times, possibly 3 times as much as that per month, is like saying that in some cases, your executive assistant in America is making $300,000. So for people to get a perspective of how that really helps change people's lives, and that's just obviously they do many other tasks, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. On it, it's incredibly interesting. Now, it's language barriers, and understanding, their culture, and understanding kind of what their priorities might be and some of their hurdles from a language standpoint. How do we bridge that gap?
Yeah, good question. Look, and coming back to your previous point, and it plays into this as well, the world is globalizing incredibly quickly. It was only in 1880 where England, the UK, didn't have one time zone because people never traveled between towns in the UK back in 1880. Now we are in one world. You look at the kids, the millennials here in Manila in Philippines, they are growing up on a diet of NBA basketball on YouTube, Netflix, like basically the US. And you walk down the street here, everything is written in English, and you've got all of the US brands and, pizza and everything. So the world is becoming homogenized, for better or worse. That means that, and the Philippines is the third largest English-speaking country in the world. 500 years ago, it was actually colonized by the Spanish, which brought in Catholicism. So it gave, sort of strong cultural alignment to the similar sort of values and sort of how societies are structured 500 years ago. Then it was pretty much colonized again by the US about 70 years ago. And then, they're very, very closely aligned. Now, in terms of accent, depending on what you want, you can get basically, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference if they are US or not. But having said that, depending on the type of role, if you get an accountant or a coder, they're generally not the best communicators. So don't expect the best accent and best communications for that. But if you are looking for sort of a VA, salesperson, customer service, then absolutely, the language would be, an imperceivable difference, really.
Yeah, no, it's actually, I didn't realize that, but when you brought it up, it's very, very true. The colonization, that there's a certain culture that probably came along with that, and I always say the boxer Manny Pacquiao, is as religious as it comes, and I'm sure I think he's I don't know if he's running for president there, but he was some level of government official, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he's in the Senate. I met him in the Senate, actually. He's definitely active here, and hugely Catholic country. I think it's one of the biggest sort of Catholic populations now in the world as well.
Yeah, very, very, very interesting stuff. What as far as how you filter through companies, so going and trying to figure out which company is legit, which company isn't. What are things that people need to ask to make sure they understand? Because I think that a lot of questions, and in myself, I have the same experience. I think people do a great job of answering a lot of my upfront questions, but then when you kind of get into the weeds, sometimes that's where the issue is. How can people navigate beyond the initial questions that you normally think you should ask that get you where you want to be, but really doesn't get you necessarily the right company or the right person? How do you navigate to find the right organization? Because I do think that's a little bit different than, okay, there's a web company, that I want to reach out to do my work in the US. I can go and figure out, I can go and talk to some people and really, okay, are they good? Are they not? Obviously, there might be even online reviews, but really being able to talk to somebody in the U.S. is a big deal, and get word of mouth. How do you kind of navigate through that process in the outsourcing space?
Yeah, and it's a unique industry in that by definition, the suppliers are in one country, which happens to be a developing nation, which doesn't help either. And then the customers are in a completely different country, whether it's the US or UK, but it's a long, long way away. And the only, all of these companies, they're all privately held, so they're quite opaque in terms of finding any external information. And of course, that's why we are here, because we list 700 and we, can do part of that vetting process, and we only have good actors on our platform. But it is hard, if you're talking to people, of course, judge by the size of their website, judge by the size of their company. If you're dealing with an outsourcing supplier with under about 200 staff, then that's getting really small. And I would start to be concerned about their facilities, their processes, the sophistication of their operations. Now, of course, you can do a little bit of background research, like look on LinkedIn to see how many staff they have. But you generally want to try and look around the facilities, whether it's like photos or videos, and know how many staff they have, know the infrastructure facilities, like in terms of the internet, the bandwidth, all of their HR, their recruitment processes. And then also critically, you want to try and, it's difficult, but as a rule, steer away from the sort of buying a share of someone's time, because there is very little accountability. Whereas if you have someone working full-time, turning up at 9 a.m., going home at 5 p.m., you know what they're doing. As much as you do anyone in your office. And it's where, people are sort of, kind of selling you 10 hours a week, then those people are probably juggling 100 hours a week worth of clients and work. So, equally, if you do sales, some people go to like telesales kind of places where they do 5 calls for you, then 5 calls for other people. Again, try and stick with the outsourcing suppliers where they're dedicated staffing for your account, and that's all they do, because obviously then you get more momentum, more insight with that person, but also there's more accountability because, again, they're there and they're working for you. But it is hard, and this is why we have developed this platform. We also do BPO tours, like video tours, interviews with the owners, so that there is some third-party visibility on what's out there. But generally, I don't want to scare people. Generally, if it's an established outsourcing operation, these are highly, highly sophisticated operations, more so than what you might expect in kind of a sort of mid-US firm. Highly sophisticated. Some of the bigger ones have about 250,000 employees, with about 80,000 employees in the Philippines. Super sophisticated operations, and generally you can trust that they are going to do well by you if you do your general DD.
The 4-hour work week, which I read the book, I think and I've read it when it first came out. I think it did a lot for the outsourcing business, and then people were discovering for the first time, like some people now, it actually kind of is a detriment in the sense that people don't realize that it is a serious thing. It's not something that you could just go and literally, okay, I have somebody go and do something over here and just leave it alone and go off and do everything I want to do. It's important for people to understand that it is like it's someone who's working for you, and you have to treat it as such. It is not the 4-hour work week realm. It's one of the things that help people get excited about it, and then at the same time, people think it's going to be like the 4-hour work week as described. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, look, Tim Ferriss has done a great job for building awareness of the Philippines and remote staffing, but the freelance, side gig kind of thing also has its downsides. Again, comparing it to employment, the Tim Ferriss model, going to Upwork, Freelancer, those sort of places, it's a little bit like looking for a part-time student to do a bit of work for you, and you're hunting around Central Park to find them, versus going down to Wall Street and finding a professional services firm to engage and do what you want. Now, it is the difference between light and day. And really, the freelancers, they're all fantastic. There's an incredible workforce here, but it's highly likely that they're working in substandard facilities. They've got, chickens and dogs barking in the background, and that is, unfortunately, the sort of lower end. There's nothing wrong with them, but it's equivalent to getting a university student to do a bit of work for you. You will not get sort of a blue chip output through that. So it's kind of horses for courses, but it's we're trying to spread the message of there's highly professionalized services out there, and they won't cost you that much more. You can still save 70 to 80% on your staffing costs. So it's worth spending that fraction more because you're still saving a ton, and it sort of exponentially increases in reliability and quality and output.
Are they college educated in most cases?
Absolutely. Minimum of college educated. In fact, basically everyone. The Philippines produces about 650,000 university college graduates per year. So you can absolutely get, even PhDs for kind of under $1,000 a month kind of thing.
Very cool. Let's. I just want to shift gears a little bit. The entrepreneur bug, because this is a big part of what we talk about with success, and how did you get it? How did you get it? And what when did you become aware that you were like, this is something that I want to be? I want to run my own thing. I want to build my own companies. How did that come about for you?
Yeah, I tell people I'm an incurable entrepreneur. I remember watching Grease with John Travolta and being really excited about how, like, for some reason I watched that and interpreted that I could maybe build a business off the back of this. When I was 16, I became sort of self-employed personal trainer. And, as long as I had known, I always had ambitions of kind of making it to Wall Street. That was the sort of iconic kind of inspiration when I was growing up. And yeah, it's always been in my blood. So I started kind of self-employment when I was about 17 and never really looked back. So yeah, I'm absolutely passionate about it, and it's completely in my blood.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about personal training. That's how actually I started out as well. I think when you first go on your own and you're trading your time for money, but it's your money. You don't have to like give that to your boss, and you realize it's your money. I think that's like the first step. And when you're like dipping your toe into entrepreneurship land, and personal training, I always tell people is a great way, because you realize, you have this amount of time, you have this amount of sessions, and you're going to make X amount of dollars. And very, very quickly, you realize either you're a trade time for money person and you're cool with that, or you're someone that wants to have trainers working underneath you so you can start to build a business. And I said you go one of two ways in that. And there are people that continue to trade time for money, and that's okay. Or you realize, you know what, I want to be the guy that has guys working for me, build the system, build all those kind of things. And for me, that was one of the things that ended up launching me into a different thought process of owning my own business. It's interesting that you say that. What are some of the things that, for people that are looking to get into their own business, that you think are real important for them to understand about that process?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say that about personal training. I mean, I was about 18 and I made that realization that it's not very scalable and you would have to hire people under you. But then I also realized that it's not really scalable because people make relationships with those people, not necessarily your brand or your system. So, it's funny you raised that, and that was exactly my sort of eureka moment with personal training. And, I think that what people learn from doing business and how they get into it is really it's an apprenticeship. You've got to do it. You've got to get in and do it. You're going to make a huge amount of mistakes along the way, but I don't think that you can get it from reading a book. Of course, it helps, and of course, the podcasts are incredible. But there's no substitute for getting in there. And I think also, I've been through a lot of roller coaster rides with entrepreneurship. You're not really going to get through this without a lot of bruises and scrapes and disappointments, and it really is an absolute grind. But ideally you come out better than what you went in. And it's a super amazing ride that I think anyone would, once you start, you can't really trade it in or go back.
Yeah. Once you begin, that's the hardest thing for, especially when you have loved ones involved with you, or someone that has that's the greatest thing about it, is until you start that ride, until you're involved in that ride, no one really understands. Because they say, well, okay, you were riding high and you're making this amount of money, and then all of a sudden it dropped down to here, and then it rode back. You figured out something else, and you're doing really well. And then that roller coaster as an entrepreneur, which goes from no employees to a lot of employees to no dollars to a lot of dollars to maybe a plateau and you have to have that fortitude to be able to get involved in it. But it's the greatest ride there is to me. I mean, I was I still coach football, but I was a football player in America, and to me, there's nothing that comes as close to it as being an entrepreneur. Like when you get a fail, it is like you lost the game, and not only is it like you lost the game, but now you're losing money. You could be out the street, right? And when you win and you hit a home run, it's the same level of elation, and then you want to kind of repeat that as much as you possibly can, and then the impact you have on people too, because you really serve as inspiration. When a lot of people talk about, I want to accomplish this, or I want to accomplish that, or they post a lot of positive messages. Entrepreneurs literally live it every single day. They literally are that message to me every single day, the good, the bad, and the ugly that go along with it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the most, I believe it, it's a game. That doesn't make it too, but it's the most all encompassing game, and it has the biggest consequences and the biggest outcomes. And it's compelling, and it's addictive. But some people kind of don't come out alive. It's a tough game and it is scary. But there's incredible rewards along the way. There's wins along the way, and I remember when I was about 22 and started employing my first person, and I'm like, wow, this is getting serious now. You're like then responsible for other people, right. And incredible, yeah. And then you got to make sure you pay the bills. And I'm sure every entrepreneur has been at that point where they really struggled to make salaries or payroll or whatever. It's an incredible ride, and I think that's why entrepreneurs do have this community now, and it's growing and building and getting stronger because people do need the support, but also can learn off each other. And super crazy ride that we're all on.
Right, and this kind of global economy, the number of niches that can scale now are great. I mean, you could scale, any number of different kind of things in businesses in today's economy. And that's really cool. That gives a lot of more opportunities. It's interesting where, we deal with where people talk about, obviously because of automation and AI, certain jobs go away, but then certain other jobs open up, and you have to figure out, who would have, when I was a kid, you would have never thought that football coaches would make $10 million a year coaching a game in college or in the NFL. Like that wasn't a path for people 20 years ago. You wouldn't have thought that running camps would be $1 million business. That was just something somebody did in their summertime. And there's numerous other things, waste management, which is one of the biggest companies in America now, like picking up garbage as a private company and not being picked up by the public sector. No one would have thought that would have been a business 25, 30 years ago. And I think that's one of the great things about entrepreneurship. No one would have thought outsourcing in the Philippines would have been a viable business 25, 30 years ago.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. I mean, you look at the internet, and a lot of us are based on internet businesses now, and a lot of it is moving towards service-based businesses. But there's only, I think like 1.5, 2 billion people online, and there's still another 6 billion people yet to come online. So, everyone's kind of getting their positions ready for this whole market to literally quadruple over, I believe, in our lifetime. And then everything just magnifies. Everything becomes exponentially bigger as billions more people join the market. As we become one marketplace. The potential is just incredible. So and exciting.
It's amazing. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. Tell everybody where they can find you, how they can get a hold of you, how they can reach out to your outsourcing firm and your website.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm super passionate about outsourcing and here to help anyone that wants to get into it and add rocket fuel to their business. They can find tons of free information on our website. It's outsourceaccelerator.com. We've got about 5,000 pages of content there and videos and everything. And they can reach out to me, which is Derek at outsourceaccelerator.com, which is DEREK.
Perfect. That's very simple. So a lot of times I get like 9,000 different Twitter and Instagrams that I have to.
I'm kind of an email guy. I don't even tweet really. I'm on Twitter, but I don't tweet.
That's fantastic. So that's the easy way to reach out to you. So outsourceaccelerator.com and Derek at outsourceaccelerator.com. Derek, thanks so much for being on. I really appreciate it.
Amazing.
Like it's very, very late there. So I'm assuming you'll be going to sleep soon. I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, David. Thanks so much.